Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 21st of July, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So just before I put out a tweet kind of like discussing the 5 things I'm most excited about in Ethereum. So these shouldn't come as a shock to any of you, but I did want to kind of like jump into a little bit of them here and explain, I guess, like why I'm excited about them. But I listed them off here and I basically said, you know, the merge / staking as number 1. And these are actually ordered, to be honest. Kind of like the order was a funny thing to come up with, but they're in order of what I'm excited about the most. And obviously, once the merge happens, that kind of like falls off the list, but staking kind of falls into that. Like I'm super excited about proof of stake just generally, and that's not just going to kind of like be a one event thing with the merge. That's kind of like obviously an ongoing thing. And then number 2 is layer 2s. I mean, again, like pretty obvious here. I'm excited about literally everything got to do with layer 2s. We've had so many exciting announcements lately, and the kind of ecosystems just continue to grow. It's just amazing to see. Number 3 is dank sharding, like the full dank sharding rollout. Obviously, it's going to be rolling out in stages, but I think that is going to unlock the next era of scalability for Ethereum because it will give those layer 2s so much extra space to kind of like put their core data on and collapse those costs there. 4 is DeFi. I have a funny relationship with DeFi, I think, where, you know, I was obviously around for DeFi summer, and I think that since then, I haven't really seen that much innovation that has gotten me very excited. I feel like when it comes to kind of like what DeFi is good at, it's good at what it's already kind of like created is basically what's going to take over the world. Like I don't think we need to keep trying to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of it with DeFi. And that's why I think these days it's kind of like hard to get excited about new things in DeFi because there just isn't that many new things that actually are sustainable. And we saw with DeFi 2.0, most of it was not sustainable. And we saw with kind of like some of these other schemes that popped up like Terra, just not sustainable. And all the things that are sustainable are boring. Like, let's be honest, guys. Like, finance, I've always said, is not something that is supposed to be exciting for most people. I mean, it's exciting when you're making money, but all the day-to-day financial activities that you do or that you're going to do are just not generally that exciting. Not compared to something like, you know, NFTs and kind of like gaming and things like that. Like, finance is generally something that most people kind of like outsource, or most people kind of just don't want to have to think too hard about. Investing, I guess, like is orthogonal. I mean, it fits under the finance umbrella, but investing can be as boring or as exciting as you want it to be. It can be boring because you can just buy an index and just sit on it and that's it. Or it can be exciting where you're actively trading and investing, looking for new companies and protocols and stuff to invest in and things like that. So as I said, my relationship with DeFi is quite I guess funny. I wouldn't call it a love-hate because I absolutely love DeFi and think it's going to take over the world, but it's more of a fact of the innovation in DeFi is just very slow-paced because the innovation in finance in general is very slow-paced. And I think that what we're just continuing to do within DeFi is improve the existing primitives and also bring on-chain kind of like primitives that may not have been able to be successful in layer 1 Ethereum, or the more complex things that required other things to exist before they could exist. Like, for example, a lot of things tap into money markets and decentralized exchanges, and without those kind of like things can't exist. And they're also expanding onto layer 2s and stuff like that. So definitely still very excited about DeFi, but it's a different kind of excitement as opposed to those other 3 things that I've already mentioned. And then 5th here is public goods funding. Obviously, you guys know I'm really into public goods funding. I think that it's kind of like an amazing way to kind of like touch on many different things of what Ethereum enables. Public goods funding doesn't just touch on kind of like DAOs and human coordination, but it touches on different mechanisms and kind of like falls into the DeFi bucket as well. And NFTs, like you could kind of like issue NFTs and donate the funds to public goods, exactly what we did with the Daily Gwei Anniversary NFT. Falls into DeFi because you can do things like what the protocol guild is doing, where it's going into these kind of like DeFi treasuries and saying, hey, like you have tokens that are valuable and you should kind of like donate a share of them to public goods. And there's other ways as well. Like you could do something where you could have a protocol that donates a small part of the kind of like revenue to public goods and things like that. So there is like public goods funding is a broad kind of like topic, but definitely something that I'm extremely excited about. And I continue the tweet by saying each of these things is a deep rabbit hole that you can spend countless hours engrossing yourself in. Ethereum truly is the infinite garden. And I mean, you can, like, literally, guys, like I spend like so much time in each of these kind of worlds, especially because I try to kind of like keep up with everything for the refuel, but just like wrapping your head around everything got to do with the merge and proof of stake Ethereum. like if you wanted to dive as deep into it and to become like an expert on it, it would take you a long time to do that, right? Layer 2s, same thing. Like layer 2s, like that term, once you unpack that, it gets crazy because you have the different kind of like optimistic rollups, you have the different zk rollups, and you have the different flavors of zk rollups and optimistic rollups, and you have everything that falls into that. Then you have everything that kind of like enables those things. You have the history of scaling, just so much going on there. Same is true for dank sharding, DeFi, and public goods funding. Like each of these rabbit holes, just it can seem endless, and there's always new things coming out for each of them too. So those are the things I'm most excited about. I think generally, if you speak to any OG Ethereum, number one or close to number one on their list would definitely be the merge/staking. Like it's been such a long time coming for so many of us, and it's been talked about for so long, and it is something that's going to fundamentally change the properties of the Ethereum network in a really positive way, or at least we believe in a really positive way, that it's hard for us not to be excited about that. The same is true for layer 2s and sharding generally. These things have been spoken about for such a long time, and we're finally at the place where we have the layer 2 networks live. They're not just pipe dreams anymore. They're live, they have users, they have applications, and they get better every single day. And sharding, you know, it's not there just yet. We don't have sharding in any form yet, but we have dank sharding, which we believe is a really nice kind of like workable, not as complex sharding kind of like implementation that we can push into the network hopefully next year. And then there's a bunch of other things that kind of obviously fall into all of that as well. But those kind of like three, I think that pretty much like all the Ethereans, all the hardcore Ethereans would agree are the most exciting things. And then, you know, some Ethereans are more excited about NFTs than they are about DeFi. Like I didn't list NFTs here at all because you guys know I'm not really big into NFTs. It doesn't just, I mean, it doesn't excite me. Like as simple as that. It doesn't excite me like other things do. And you know, some Ethereans just aren't into public goods funding like I am, for example. Like maybe they think it's cool, but they're not like diving deep into it like I do. So there's all of that kind of like when you think about it, that all comes together, and you have like this, I guess, like baseline of what people are excited about, and then they kind of branch off from there, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm interested to hear what you guys are most excited about. You can kind of like obviously put a comment in the YouTube comments or go into the Discord channel and let me know what you're most excited about. I'm always curious to kind of like hear from other people because I might be missing something here. You might be excited about something that I haven't even thought of. Like obviously there's Web3 and DAOs and maybe social kind of like finance and social tokens and human coordination problems and stuff like that. Maybe that excites you more than any of this stuff. Like let me know. I'd love to know. But I'm going to leave it at that. You can kind of leave your comments below or in the Discord channel. All right, so Ethereum mainnet Shadow Fork 10 got announced, I think, yesterday or today, and it will be happening on Wednesday, the 27th of July at around 2 p.m. UTC. As I've said before, these Shadow Forks are going to keep happening up until the merge, up until the mainnet merge, which is still a couple of months away from today. Well, hopefully a couple of months away, right? We have Girly to go through first, and there's also an all core devs call today as well. I think, you know, it's probably already happened or happening as you're watching the refuel. I can't remember exactly what time it is, but it's expected on that call. We're going to get like hard confirmation on the Girly TTD and date around that, which we had, you know, pretty kind of, I mean, we had soft confirmation of the TTD. It was proposed and everything like that, but you know, it's pretty safe to say that Girly is going to run through the merge transition between August 9th and August 11th, just depending on when TTD gets hit. And then I think they'll probably discuss a bit more about mainnet kind of like dates as well. And of course, everything surrounding that, like the Paris and Bellatrix hard forks that need to happen to get the execution and consensus layers ready for the merge transition. So yeah, just some fresh merge news there for you guys. All right, so Peter from the Geth team put out a tweet today where he's quote tweeting another account called Spacetime here. And this Spacetime account said, if Ethereum core devs decide to radically change the EVM interface, all the EVM compatible projects like Filecoin, VM will have a lot of work on their hands. How are they participating in ETH governance? And then Peter quote tweets this by saying, the moment when everyone clones the EVM to leech away value from Ethereum, but then go all Pikachu when Ethereum's EVM keeps evolving further. I think he means go all Pikachu is that like Pikachu shocked face, just in case you missed the reference there. And then Peter continues by saying, the EVM is made for Ethereum. Anyone using it should be aware of the risks involved in relying on stuff out of their control. And then Peter continues by saying, this is not a debate up for governance. The EVM is not a public good to be used by everyone, and forcing a lowest common denominator at the same time. The EVM will always follow Ethereum's vision, and everyone is free to tag along or get left behind. I think this is a pretty strong stance that Peter is taking here, and one that I wholeheartedly agree with. Like, obviously, Ethereum is open source. You're free to fork Geth and you're free to kind of like use the EVM, but don't expect, I guess, like the EVM to adhere to your standards. Don't expect you as, I'm saying you as kind of like someone who's like a chain founder, for example, like a layer 1 chain founder that has just kind of forked the EVM or forked Geth and expects the EVM devs to basically play ball with them. No, that's not the case at all. The EVM, as Peter says, he will always follow Ethereum's vision. It is built for Ethereum and Ethereum alone. If people want to fork it, that's on them. The Ethereum community has no obligation, has no duty to make sure that other implementations of a forked version are kind of like a stable, are kept up to date, kind of sustainable. Like we've got nothing to do with that at the end of the day. And the thing is that doesn't mean that these other kind of like ecosystems can't participate in Ethereum governance, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to dictate what upgrades come to Ethereum, especially if those upgrades are things that they want included so that it can kind of like fork it off and go leech value off of it somewhere. It seems insane to me that people would think that these forked EVM chains are first-class citizens next to Ethereum. They're not at all. Ethereum is the first-class citizen. These forked EVM chains are things that Ethereum, the Ethereum community shouldn't even be considering when talking about Ethereum governance and improvements to the EVM and things like that. So I thought this was just like a really good stance from Peter, and as I said, one that I wholeheartedly agree with because it just annoys the shit out of me, honestly, these days. And for a while now, where people will just fork Geth, fork the EVM, make a lot of money doing it because they attach their own token to it, right? And then expect the Ethereum community to play nice with them, expect the Ethereum community to fix their issues, expect the Geth devs and the EVM devs to kind of like help them with things. No, that's just not the way it is, guys. Like EVM is built for Ethereum and Ethereum alone. And when I say Ethereum, I mean like the Ethereum network, the Ethereum community, Ethereum ecosystem. It is not built for the Avalanche C chain. It's not built for Phantom. It's not even built for the Polygon POS chain. Just because Polygon is aligned with Ethereum doesn't mean that they're kind of like EVM POS chain gets to kind of dictate anything, and doesn't mean they get to dictate anything. That's not how it works at all. But yeah, gonna leave that one at that. You can read through some comments here for some further discussion on this, but I thought it was a great little, I guess, like stern kind of like statement from Peter here. All right, so I think the biggest news over the last 24 hours, which was something that I talked about yesterday, was zkSync's announcement. Now, their announcement was that their zkSync 2.0, which they're calling the first zkEVM rollup, will be live on mainnet in 100 days, and they also have a public roadmap available in this blog post for the rest of the year. So you can see the public roadmap here with 100 days to mainnet. Now, before I get into this, I did want to kind of like discuss a bit of the drama around this. There's obviously been 3 zkEVM related announcements this week. We had Polygon announce their zkEVM kind of like roadmap and testnet and things like that. We had Scroll announce their pre-alpha zkEVM testnet, and now we've had zkSync announce their zkEVM 2.0 zkEVM mainnet or roadmap generally here, and they've all claimed to be first. At the end of the day, guys, like this is the most asinine kind of debate and argument. Like, who cares who was first, really, at the end of the day? Like, it really doesn't matter. What matters is getting this stuff shipped, getting it to mainnet, getting it ready for developers to build on and users to get value out of. Because at the end of the day, 99.99% of users and developers do not give a shit who was first. They just want something to use and to build on. That's it. So this debate is pointless. It is so stupid. I don't even care who's first. Like, I don't care who's last. Like, all that matters is building a good product, and that's all that should matter. So now that I got that out of my system, I do want to kind of like dive into this 100 days to mainnet roadmap that you can see on my screen here, where you can see that, you know, I guess like they've got 9 steps here, and we're currently in between step 3 and 4. And basically what we're most interested in is when it goes live on mainnet, which is 100 days from now, and now being July 21st. So we should expect full alpha mainnet by the end of the year. Now, they're calling this an alpha mainnet, not a beta or anything like that. So again, guys, like I mentioned yesterday, how just because these zkEVMs are being announced and kind of like they've got mainnet dates and they've got test nets and stuff like that, doesn't mean they're anywhere near their final form. Doesn't mean they're anywhere near a kind of like a good user experience. Like, if it's going to be in an alpha state, then I expect there to be lots of bugs. I expect there to be lots of annoyances with the UX, and I don't expect them to be anywhere near as scalable as they can be. I mean, even the optimistic rollups that have been around for a while now are still in beta. I mean, Arbitrum hit its limit with Odyssey, right? Because it has that kind of like hard cap on it, and they're bringing Nitro out soon. Optimism, I don't think has hit limits yet, but they're definitely not in their end state either. So when looking at these sorts of stuff, I know the marketing can be quite forward and quite kind of like bombastic, but it's good to keep kind of like firmly planted in reality about these things. They're cool. They're coming much sooner than we thought they were, but they're not going to be like full mainnet kind of like releases where everything's going to work smoothly anytime soon. Maybe that happens next year sometime, but it's definitely not happening this year. But in saying that, it's cool to see that zk's EVM will be live in a mainnet fashion kind of by the end of the year. Polygon, I think, is also aiming from that, as I mentioned yesterday, and Scroll, I believe, would be too. So I think it's just amazing that we've gone from how is Ethereum going to scale to, wow, there's so many scaling solutions that we're now debating the most kind of like pointless stuff, like which zkEVM came first. It's an amazing place to be, really, compared to where we were just a couple of years ago, just even a year ago. Like I mean, a couple of years ago, right? It's July 2022. It was July 2020. That was like basically the start of DeFi summer, and that's when the fees started skyrocketing. There was no kind of like solution at that point. There were obviously rollups being worked on and things like that, but no one knew when they were going to come out. No one knew how scalable they were going to be. zk stuff seemed kind of like pipe dream, kind of like pie in the clouds, kind of like pie in the sky. Sorry, it seemed like a very, very distant dream. Fast forward 2 years later, we have extremely robust optimistic rollups live with lots of applications, lots of users. We have three zkEVMs, right, that are kind of basically heading towards mainnet by the end of this year. We have non-EVM networks like Starknet, right? We have private networks like Aztec. Like this sort of stuff, if you told me that we would have all this 2 years ago, me being like the biggest ETH ball in the world, I wouldn't have believed you, because really it's caught me off guard too, how fast this stuff has come. But I think it goes back to a thesis I had. I don't know if I've talked about it on the refill, but I've definitely written about it in my newsletter, where I basically said that keeping Ethereum layer 1 simple and not scaling the base layer for kind of like users, but instead scaling it for layer 2s is really powerful, because what this does is it creates these scaling wars that I was talking about yesterday, where instead of Ethereum layer 1 trying to pander to every single person, trying to do everything on its own, Ethereum layer 1 does what it does best. It becomes a super decentralized and secure settlement layer, and it continues being that in perpetuity, right? And then it also upgrades itself to benefit layer 2. So it basically becomes like a B2B, business to business kind of network. And then these layer 2s, there's like tens of them already. There's probably going to be hundreds of them in the near future. They're all going to compete with each other for end users, for those users that obviously everyone wants, for applications, for developers, for all that sort of stuff. That's where the competition lies. And that, and this is kind of my thesis here, that leads to much better outcomes than if Ethereum layer 1 tried to do everything. Because then Ethereum layer 1 would only be competing with other layer 1s, which, as we've seen, they're not really something to compete with. They're actually, like, most of them are shit. Most of them aren't even worth mentioning because they're so bad. Whereas these layer 2s, they're not, right? Like, there are some that are obviously forks and aren't that great, but there are so many of them that are awesome, bleeding edge technology that are all hungry to become the premier rollup or layer 2 platform on Ethereum and win that kind of race for developers and users. And it's really just getting started. Like, I think the next 5 years will be defined by this. There'll be a very kind of like cutthroat kind of competition for this. It's going to get nasty at times. It's going to get tribal, especially as these things get tokens. I mean, we already know pretty much all of them are going to like have tokens. Most of them have confirmed it by now. Some of them have them out. So I guess like, I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be awesome, but I also think there's going to be a bit of nastiness involved too, because of the fact that there's going to be so much competition. Ethereum obviously benefits from all of this because layer 2s pay Ethereum for security. They're going to use ETH as that MOE and that kind of like money on their and kind of like fee token on their networks. Some of them will opt not to do that, but I think that those that opt not to do it will not be as successful as those that do. So yeah, if you take all that into consideration, I think that it just leads to a very, very vibrant Ethereum scaling kind of like ecosystem there. But that's a little bit off track. Besides kind of like the roadmap that they have here, Matter Labs, or I guess like Matter Labs, the people behind zkSync, also put out a bunch of different information in this blog post, which you can read. I'll link this in the YouTube description below. What I really liked was that they put kind of like their, I guess, mission and values and principles in the blog post. So they said, at zkSync, we embrace the ethos of Ethereum, the value of Ethereum's trustless security, decentralization, the importance of letting our ecosystem partners have choice, the power of being fully open source, the commitment to being truly community owned, and scaling without degrading security or decentralization. That's basically like Ethereum in a nutshell, right? So I'm really glad to see them just recommit to this. I think that as long as the layer 2s do this, kind of like they're signaling socially that they're very committed to becoming part of the Ethereum family or continuing to be part of the Ethereum family rather than trying to leech value off of Ethereum. So I like that. But anyway, you can read this blog post for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. Just another super exciting announcement about zkEVM this week. Just funny that we get 3 in the same week. And that's competition right there for you guys. Like the fact that they all announced in the same week, it's cutthroat, guys. Like everyone wants to have the first production-ready zkEVM to mainnet where developers can start building on to start building that moat and network effect. So we're going to see much more competition as the months go by here. All right, so speaking of Scroll, they put out another tweet thread / blog post today titled Introducing Scroll Technical Principles. To scale Ethereum with our zkEVM-based ZK rollup, we have designed Scroll with a set of key technical principles in mind which uphold Scroll's core values. Now, this is very similar, I guess, to what I was saying about zkSync before, but the kind of like core values and principles here obviously is kind of like taking on board Ethereum's core values and principles, such as ensuring user security, maintaining EVM equivalence, efficiency for a great user experience, decentralization across all layers, and a bunch of different things here, which you can read through in the thread or in the blog post as well. Now, what's funny about this is that I saw Polygon and zkSync mentioned a lot, but I didn't see Scroll mentioned a lot when people were talking about zkEVM stuff. And I think that's because Scroll has kind of like been in stealth mode for a while, and then just now ramping up their marketing. That's another thing that I think is going to determine the big winners within the industry. And I've talked about this plenty of times before. Marketing and business development is going to determine the winners. It's not about who's got the best tech at the end of the day. Like, it's never been about that when it comes to technology. What it's been about, or at least consumer-facing technology, what it's been about is marketing and brand awareness. I mean, objectively, you could say the iPhone isn't the best technology or isn't the best phone out there in terms of kind of like objective, I guess, like hardware specs, for example, right? But then you kind of like get into a debate, okay, well, the software marries really well with the hardware, so that makes up for it. And there's all these debates here. I mean, I said objective, but it's kind of like hard to be objective about things, especially because there is tribal wars in the smartphone market as well. But that's just like an example of the fact of the matter is that like the iPhone has incredible brand awareness and incredible marketing. I mean, everyone knows what an iPhone is, and that is definitely a big part of its success. Doesn't matter if it doesn't have the latest tech, doesn't have the latest gadgets, this, that, and the other. There is other things for people who want that. Obviously, there's the Samsung phones and other phones out there as well. So when I think comes to kind of like roll-ups and layer 2s in general, I think the same principles apply here of marketing and brand awareness, especially for getting kind of like partnerships and developers on board and things like that. And I've mentioned Polygon as being like the front runner here by far, to be honest. But I'm hoping that other ecosystems like Scroll, zkSync, Starkware, Arbitrum, Optimism, all of them, I hope they ramp up their marketing and business development efforts as well, because that is definitely what's going to determine the big winners in my eyes. But you should check out Scroll's technical principles piece here. I'll link it in the YouTube description. And finally here on the zkEVM debate, there was also a debate around kind of like which zkEVM was better. Now, Atiia here put together a great thread about kind of like EVM equivalency versus compatibility and how it's a red herring. The L2 state and RPC calls can easily be wrapped around to provide equivalent dev experience on L1 and L2. Maintainability is the critical factor. Now, you can read this thread. It's not that long for a breakdown here of what Ali is talking about, but this is what I was kind of saying yesterday about how the fact of the matter is that EVM equivalency versus compatibility, I mean, there is definitions of what these things are, but it doesn't actually kind of like matter that much as long as you adhere to what kind of, I guess, developers and kind of like users are used to, which is basically providing the equivalent dev experience that developers are getting from Ethereum Layer 1 or other EVM ecosystems like Optimism or Arbitrum, and providing users with the same kind of like experience that they get on Ethereum Layer 1 or other EVM chains, right? Like being able to use MetaMask with it, for example, being able, having the same transaction flow and things like that. Like that stuff is what matters most. It doesn't really matter if it's equivalent or compatible, except for like the edge cases, and except for things that may matter to developers more than users. But yeah, it's kind of like a red herring, as Ali says here. But you can check out this thread from them to get the breakdown of exactly what this means. I'll link it in the YouTube description. All right, so cool to see a new Dune Analytics dashboard focusing on the protocol guild from DataMonkey here today. So this is a transparent, up-to-date finances dashboard for the one-year pilot of the protocol guild. So there's a lot of useful information here on the protocol guild's finances, such as what tokens they have, the allocation of those tokens and what addresses they're allocated to, how much is vested, how much is claimable, total funding, all that good stuff. Yeah, and you can see it on my screen. Obviously, I'll link this in the YouTube description for you guys to check out below. But I just thought this is a really, really cool kind of like dashboard that you should definitely check out. And I guess what I liked most about this dashboard was the fact that it kind of tracks the tokens that the protocol guild has, and also kind of like where all this stuff's going or where all the money's going. Because I guess the thing with these public goods funding is you want it to be transparent as possible, so that money just doesn't get thrown into, I guess, like a pit, and then whoever gets that money, you know, you don't know who gets that money. So I think that it's really cool that this kind of like dashboard can even exist to begin with, right? Like where it's fully on chain, we can kind of like track where all the money's going and make sure it's going to the right people. So I really, really love that. All right, finally here we had this kind of like a DB account on Twitter announced today from Coinbase's blog that Coinbase had no financing exposure to Celsius, 3 Arrows Capital, and Voyager. Now, what I've wanted to kind of like discuss about this is that there's been too many threads on Twitter and too much kind of like fight on Twitter lately about Coinbase and how they're insolvent. Like, I think I've discussed this on the refuel before, but if you believe any of that, guys, like I don't understand why you would. Like, think about it logically for a sec. Coinbase, just because they're kind of like downsizing or cutting staff, doesn't mean they're insolvent, right? Just because they're kind of like cutting costs doesn't mean they're insolvent. If you expect a bear market as a crypto company, right? Especially a crypto company that relies on, 90+% of its revenue comes from trading fees. If you expect the bear market to last like 2-3 years or something like that, why would you keep the excess fat in your company? You wouldn't. You would cut it. Like you would cut the kind of like parts of the company that you wouldn't need to save money, so that you don't kind of like keep bleeding cash over time unnecessarily. Now, anyone who's ever studied a business or a company would know this, and I think a lot of people that fall for this just I think that everything in crypto had exposure to 3 Arrows Capital and Celsius and Voyager and things like that. I mean, to be fair, a lot of companies did, but not every company did. And Coinbase, of all companies, like in kind of like my eyes, wouldn't. And I know Coinbase has copped flack in the past, especially from me, around like token listings that they do and how they're listing kind of like, pure shitcoin scam tokens. That's completely orthogonal to them being insolvent or not, guys. Like, I don't understand how people kind of like come to this conclusion. Really, and it may be just noobs, and maybe just people kind of like spreading FUD because they want the market to crash or something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate the fact that if Coinbase was insolvent, guys, it would mean like most of the space is insolvent, to be honest. Like Coinbase is still the gold standard in terms of kind of like managing their risk. And I've said this before, it's all about managing a risk. And I think Coinbase is definitely up there in terms of that. They're the only exchange, I think, or one of the only centralized exchanges, at least the longest running one, that hasn't suffered a hack, right? Like that in and of itself is very impressive considering how long Coinbase has been around for. And on top of that, their finances are completely public because they're a public company. So you can even verify this for yourself. I don't know. I'm so just puzzled by the fact that people still think that Coinbase is insolvent. It must be like the XRP fanboys who are mad at Coinbase for delisting XRP. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just like a funny little joke there. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate the fact that Coinbase being insolvent is completely false. Them cost-cutting is actually good. It actually kind of like, ironically enough, lowers their chances of being kind of like insolvent or one day or kind of like becoming insolvent. Obviously, the chance is always greater than zero, but if you keep kind of like bleeding unnecessary cash and the bear market lasts longer than you thought it did, well, then you may kind of like put yourself into a dangerous position where you may have to kind of like go raise outside capital again, or have to kind of, do some other kind of like weird things in order to get the capital that you need, which is what some of these companies did. I mean, FTX or SBF bailed out a few of these things, like gave a loan to BlockFi, essentially, and bailed out BlockFi. So there is things like that going on, but yeah, no, I don't expect that with Coinbase, that's for sure. But anyway, I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.